I hope you all had a good lunch after our discussion this morning. We're now going to go into the deeper wave of the Da Vinci principles. We've got them here, all 7 of them. We spoke very briefly about the quantum domain, which I relate to the Da Vinci principles in terms of what I call the Da Vinci matrix. The Da Vinci matrix seems to be a matrix he created for us as a quantum field of many, many possibilities. And we can see by the way he was a very, very high level initiate, that he could create over 13,000 designs in 57 years. And that's quite a remarkable feat. And I mean, these designs aren't small. They're not just little hand gestures. They are great paintings like the Last Supper, the Mona Lisa, and obviously St. John the Baptist, etc. His equestrian horse statue that he actually created, which the French troops destroyed, etc. He was also an engineer, a marine, a biologist, a geologist, architect, etc. So we covered all of that this morning, but we didn't go into too much detail of the 7 principles. So we know all about him from this morning, his greatness, how he was connected on a very high level, which means he was deeply interconnected with the quantum field, which was a language they did not use in the Renaissance period. So his questioning would have been a little bit different. Questioning was vital for Da Vinci. Curiosita means to be curious, which is very obvious. To be curious is to ask the right questions in a fluid way. And he combined it with dimostrazione, which is the 2nd principle. Dimostrazione involves looking at all angles of a situation, not just using one straight line. Curiosity then is about applying in-depth flexibility, where we don't just ask why like a child. When you ask why like a child, you remain like a child. It's a childish question. We need to ask, is it really true that I made a mess of this report? Is it really true that I wasted 6 months on a computer program using WordPress when I could have used .NET that I'm familiar with? Did it not give me other opportunities? Did it not give me other angles? Yes, I can say I could have started earning a living 3 months ago, but we need to learn, and what we do learn with the 7 principles is that we become very flexible, which reaches to a spiritual humility. In that flexibility, we don't become rigid in our personas. We don't go into self-righteousness, and we don't go into self-wrongness in our personas. We then cease to identify with our persona, and we live more in the soul, which Da Vinci did, obviously. And when we live in the world of the soul, we are connected to the quantum domain, which is a field of energy of our thoughts, our feelings, and our I am ego, our uniqueness, our individuality. The local domain is obviously our perception of chair, table, etc. And it's a very localized field which is very limiting. And so the 7 principles takes us up to this other domain, which gives us a greater handle on the law of attraction. Meaning we invite and we become more aware of the concept and the actuality of synchronicity. So we will meet someone by chance and we'll experience a series of events that will lead us to great opportunities. And they may seem meaningless to the persona, but it's been carefully arranged by this higher level, by this quantum field, which Da Vinci slid into. And that gives us greater opportunities to create and find the genius within us. The genius within us exists in our midbrain area, which I align with the pineal gland. It's a gland that has not been fully explored, but a lot of people align it with the soul, the actual structure of the soul. It's like a shriveled eye. And in there are various archetypes, there are various sacred geometries, which Da Vinci tapped into, especially when he worked with the Vitruvian Man and the 5 Platonic solids, which are the basis of creation. So he had tapped into this area, this midbrain area, which provides us sensory perception, but he was able to somehow locate a relationship with the pineal gland. And you could say it's obvious when you really study the pineal gland. He was able to heighten the 5 senses, which involves sensazione, is to heighten the 5 senses so you activate the 6th sense, which is your high intuitive sense of the soul, and that involves insight. So what do we do with insight? If someone says to you in a relationship, let's say you and I are married, Peter, and I take you to the airport, and you have to go to Alaska or whatever for 6 months, and I'm really angry, and I shout and scream at you, and I call you all the names under the sun. Now, if you were a victim, you would hear me as and perceive me with the 5 senses as this really nasty person, this foul-mouthed idiot that doesn't know how to have a relationship. But with insight, you will actually hear and listen to me saying, I love and I miss you, and I just don't want you to be away for that long. I'm too proud to say it. So I'm actually not the idiot, I'm not foul-mouthed, but I'm too proud. So with insight, you hear me, you give me a hug, and you say, I'm going to Skype you every day, please do not worry, I love you, etc. And that will calm you down. What does insight also do? It actually activates the principle of synchronicity, because we are not stuck to the 5 senses which are dimly lit. We activate synchronicity, we activate serendipity, which is coming across something by accident, and in that accident we can actually design or invent something. Serendipity is slightly different to synchronicity, yet they can be interlinked. And they are interlinked if you look at it conceptually in a certain way. So with serendipity, with insight, using the 6th sense of my soul, I'm less stressed, I'm far more understanding of a situation. I then release a difficult situation, and Da Vinci was very good at that. For example, when the French troops destroyed the equestrian statue, he was of good cheer, and he'd spent many years on it. He was of good cheer, and he rose up and he started again. He really advocated as part of Corpora Vitae to be of good cheer, to rise up and not to be overly concerned. And this made him a very playful, light-hearted person. And in this day and age, we tend to be overly serious, bogged down with the concept that we need to worry because it'll make us mature and adult-like, etc. Worry doesn't get us anywhere. It really does. It makes us even more stuck. We become more self-righteous and we go into self-wrongness, meaning we beat ourselves up. If we perceive a situation isn't good enough because of us, that's when we go into victim mode. So the whole idea is to transform the persona through the Da Vinci principles and enter into the world of the soul. So we have a balanced relationship between this persona and the soul. In that way, we embrace everyone, we don't offend everyone, and we invite more opportunities, and we take ourselves to a high level of frequency and vibration. With Sensazione, he used beautiful music, he played the lyre, he could sing. He also raised frequencies with perfumes as well. So it's to make sure that the home environment is conducive to our psyche. Otherwise, we suffer geopathic stress. Demonstrazione obviously is about looking at all angles and not to worry if we have made a mistake. If we have made an error, it's not to identify with the error and define ourselves by the error, but to rather be flexible and to learn from that error. If we define ourselves as being that mistake, we create an absolute heaviness in our field, and we create what Eckhart Tolle calls a pain body. We believe we are that error, so we no longer the I am consciousness that we experience in the quantum domain. And so we go into self-wrongness. We then perceive feed the persona with self-wrongness. And then we don't like ourselves anymore, so we need to go into self-righteousness and put someone else down to get that energy. And so we become vampires. And we don't want to do that. We want to be individuated, creative, inspired beings. Because when we go into persona vampirisms looking for energy in the wrong places, we sit at the bottom of the triangle of life. I often put the 7 principles, and not often, I do put the 7 principles in a pyramid structure where I reverse them. Curiositas at the bottom, and then Sensiana is up at the top at the apex, which is about interconnectedness. When we're in a state of inspiration, we're up at the top, we're totally self-inspired, and we inspire others. When we're at the bottom, we're depressed, we need outer motivation, our self-esteem is very low. And how do we get into a promising self-esteem structure? This is where knowledge is absolutely important, and dimostrazione involves knowledge. Dimostrazione is about not only looking at different angles and not identifying with error, but looking at different angles in order to acquire knowledge and work with that knowledge consciously. Okay, so if we understand that the root word of promise is derived from the Latin promittere, which means to foretell, what does that mean? If I am able to promise myself, if I were a writer, which I am, so I should say as a writer, I need to, let's say, write 10 pages per day. That is my promise to myself. If I break that promise, the prophecy, the foretelling, the promittere is not going to be all that clear. The prophecy of my future is not going to be clear. There's going to be traces of little loopholes. I won't feel good enough. I will dislike myself. So I set a little bit of a lower goal, maybe to be realistic. Because of daily pressures at work, I will only do 3 hours per day. Then I can keep that promise and build and earn my self-esteem, because earning self-esteem is a functionality that we require to do, because it's not a given like love. It's something that we earn, like self-confidence is something that we earn. So when we make a promise to ourselves, we need to be very, very careful. But if we apply all the principles to that promise, we can actually work with what the Greeks call teleology, which is our end goal, a clear end vision. And in that way, we're inspired. We don't need to look for outer motivation, but we also need to be realistic. So as I said, I set down 3 pages per day. So we don't go into deluded states and thinking we're some Superman and I can do 10 pages today. So realism also plays an absolutely vital role. When we're not realistic, we go into fantasy mode, and then we drop again to motivation down at the bottom, and then we go deeper into fantasy and addiction, and then we're out of balance. And then it's difficult to activate the 7 principles. Sfumato, it means shadow, engagement with the shadow. Now, the shadow is a very unknown field to a lot of people. It exists between the physical etheric body and the astral body, and it's what we cannot see within us. We cannot see the shadow. So we cannot see that we're cruel. We cannot see that we're unkind. We cannot see that we're dominating. And we cannot also see our golden qualities, because the shadow is not the container of evil. It is the container of our golden qualities. But then why does it have cruel in it? Why does it have unkindness? Why does it have meanness in it? Because in this earth plane, we work with duality. We work with cruel, kind, mean, unselfish, or happy sadness, there's always a duality. But we don't want to be cruel in its unauthentic sense. We want to be cruel in the authentic sense, so that we are kind to ourselves, that we are kind to other people, and that we raise our frequencies to a much higher level. So what does it mean to be cruel in the authentic sense? It's different to being cruel in the really nasty negative sense. It means that in order to shape the shadow to find its golden quality, to be your ally that walks next to you and no longer your enemy that devours you, it's to become aware of how you are a leader and how you have courage, and to work with those two, not to run away from those two. When you activate them, we then become more conscious and aware what was the energy of cruelty, what was the energy of selfishness, what was the energy of meanness, becomes an aware, authentic force that teaches us to be firm with ourselves and firm with others in a loving, awakened way. We no longer become wishy-washy, and we then no longer dislike ourselves. So we then find the gold in our shadow. And that's what sfumata is all about. It's obviously a lot more complex. We're going to go into that tomorrow when we hold the 2-day conference. Da Vinci battled with light and dark forces for many, many years, and we experienced that in his paintings. In the Mona Lisa, he seemed to have resolved it because she had that mysterious smile. She balanced the male and female energies. The shadow also involves a balance of male and female energies. And if you look at her smile, it's mysterious. She had resolved that. And there is a notion that she was pregnant. I won't go into that now. Scotland did a whole exploration on this. This is to do on the right-hand side of the Mona Lisa. You have the Lake Nemi. On the left-hand side, you have a different structure at all. The goddess Diana actually is the goddess of Lake Nemi, and she's the goddess of fertility and the moon. So when you look at the painting, he designed it in a way that you actually can heal your emotional pain body, because the moon has a lot to do with that. So there seems to be a balance of male and female, but he suffered a lot of jealousy, he suffered a lot of self-paranoia, because he then bought into the collective ego, and he didn't have the language of today that would enable him to disassociate with such a phenomenon. Obviously, people were very envious, and jealousy is a far more violent emotion than envy. Envy has a kind of sweetness to it. A little child wants to get to the biscuit tin at the top, whereas jealousy can evoke violence, the need to kill, death of a situation, etc. And he experienced a lot of that. We see this in his notebooks. And so there seemed to be a final resolve in St. John the Baptist when we see the gold of his body emerging out of the desert as he wears the animal skin. Obviously, that's related to theology as well, which we won't go into now. So that was the last painting he created before his death. He resolved something on a theological, spiritual level, and with sfumato. Arte Scienze is a merge of the left and the right side of the brain, which involves, in this day and age, the 4 quadrants. We discussed that this morning. The upper left quadrant is the linear thinking, numbers, logic. It holds demonstrazione at it, looking at it from different angles. The right side of the brain works with colors, works with bigger picture thinking. From the bigger picture to the detail, the upper left side of the brain is working from the detail to the bigger picture. And those two need to come into sync. If not, we become almost schizophrenic and split, and we start living mostly from our shadow. And we don't want to do that. We want to live in our soul and have the shadow as our friend with the gold in it. You have the bottom left quadrant of the brain, what is called L2. This involves administration work, tasking. It is a person, let's say, who works in the bank. It is someone who needs to be traditional and safe. It's more of the finer details of more responsible, higher work in the upper left. Let's say for the surgeon is in the upper left and the doctor. But lower left also on an archetypal level brings about the creator magician. So once the 4 quadrants of the brain are totally integrated, the lower left quadrant becomes very experiential because it's opposite the upper right side of the brain. So it becomes artistic. It's no longer stuck in the routine of tradition and conditioned thinking. There's a remarkable breakthrough as a creator magician where you're no longer attached to past history. You do have a past history, but you're no longer attached to it. Corporalita is to do with one's fitness, with one's health. Ambidextrous, and he used both hands to create. And he used nutrition, fitness, to make sure that he was very healthy for his creations. Connessione is to do with interconnectedness. And it's the top of the apex, where with all of the 6 principles, we work to a point of interconnecting with people. That means sitting down and practicing what I call deep listening. Listening to another person's story, seeing their point of view. The Renaissance offered us perspectives in their work, and this is what they teach us. What is another person's point of view under a stressful situation? What are they going through? And when we get to that point of interconnectedness, we apply the principles in relation to that, we shoot up to the apex and we are able to live in a state of inspiration. I've just been given a signal that we have to break for a while, and then we can resume in about 10-15 minutes. And then I'll go through all your questions.
Another question?
Yes, I'll go through the questions later on. Okay, thank you so much.